People often think excellence is something you stumble upon, like a hidden treasure or a lucky break. But let me tell you something a lot of folks don't realize early enough. Daily excellence is not an accident. It's designed, it's built. It's a deliberate choice, one decision at a time. And once you understand that, once you really internalize that every day is an opportunity to sharpen your edge, the whole way you move through life changes. Daily excellence is not something that just happens on its own, and it's certainly not something that luck delivers to your doorstep. It's intentional. It's built choice by choice, action by action, moment by moment. Most people go through life believing that greatness is reserved for a select few, for people blessed with extraordinary talent or unimaginable opportunities. But when you look closely at the people who consistently perform at the highest levels, you notice something very different. They don't rely on chance, and they don't wait for motivation. They construct their days deliberately, almost like architects designing a structure that can withstand time, pressure, and setbacks. That's what daily excellence really is, a structure you build from the inside out. When you make excellence a conscious decision rather than a hopeful outcome, everything shifts. Your mornings feel different because you start them with intention. Your actions feel different because you're no longer operating on autopilot. You begin noticing how much control you actually have over the quality of your day. You stop reacting to life and start shaping it. This doesn't mean you become rigid or robotic. It means you create a rhythm for yourself that supports your goals instead of undermining them. Most people underestimate how powerful one intentional decision can be. They underestimate how different their lives would look if they consistently chose the harder, wiser, more purposeful path in small moments. The truth is that excellence rarely comes from huge, dramatic decisions. It comes from the ordinary moments when you choose to do the right thing, even when no one is watching. It's choosing to focus instead of drifting. It's choosing to learn instead of settling. It's choosing to give effort instead of coasting. These choices seem small in the moment, but they compound over time. Each deliberate choice becomes a brick, and eventually those bricks form the foundation of a life built on purpose instead of randomness. When daily excellence becomes your standard, you start to see opportunities where others see obstacles. You start to find clarity in places where others feel lost. You start to feel a sense of control that most people never experience because they rely on circumstances instead of intention. When I think about what separates those who achieve their potential from those who don't, it isn't intelligence or luck or background. It's whether they've trained themselves to act purposefully every single day. Daily excellence means you're no longer drifting from one task to another, hoping things will magically align. You create alignment. You create direction. Even on the days when your motivation is low, your intention stays high. That's the real difference. Motivation comes and goes, but intention can be practiced until it becomes consistent. When you treat each day as a chance to build something meaningful instead of simply getting through it, you stop living reactively and start living strategically. You begin noticing how much your environment influences your choices. You start adjusting your habits, your routines, your focus. You become more aware of how you spend your time, who you spend it with, and what you allow into your mind. Excellence grows faster when the environment supports it, and creating that environment is a deliberate act. You can't drift into excellence any more than you can drift into peak physical shape. You have to show up for it. You have to choose it. And when you choose it repeatedly, it becomes easier. At some point, it becomes natural. What once required effort becomes your new baseline. That's the power of intentional living. Daily excellence doesn't demand perfection. It demands awareness. It demands commitment. It demands that you acknowledge the weight of small decisions. Every day offers you dozens of moments when you can choose the easy path or the purposeful one. And the more often you choose the purposeful one, the more your life begins to reflect the discipline and clarity behind those choices. Over time, you stop seeing excellence as a distant destination and start seeing it as a daily practice. You stop waiting for the perfect moment and start shaping the moment you're in. When you live this way, excellence stops being a fantasy and becomes your natural rhythm built intentionally one day at a time. Most people walk through life believing that success comes from grand gestures, dramatic breakthroughs, or massive leaps forward. They think they need a sudden burst of inspiration, a perfect opportunity, or a life-changing moment to shift their trajectory. But the truth is far less glamorous and far more powerful. Real growth, real progress, real excellence comes from small, consistent improvement. It comes from the tiny steps no one sees, the quiet efforts that don't make headlines, the little decisions that feel almost too insignificant to matter. Yet those are the very choices that shape who you become and what you achieve over time. Small improvements don't look impressive at first. They're easy to overlook because they don't provide instant gratification. When you start something new, it's tempting to want immediate results. You want to see dramatic changes, clear progress, something that proves your effort is paying off. But growth rarely works that way. In the beginning, your improvements are subtle. They're almost invisible, but they're there. A slightly better habit, a clearer thought process, a smooth action, a more disciplined choice. These micro-level adjustments accumulate quietly, but they build a foundation stronger than anything achieved through sudden bursts of energy. The problem most people face is that they give up before the compounding effect kicks in. They start with enthusiasm, expecting quick results, but when progress feels slow, they dismiss their small improvements as meaningless. They don't realize they're standing in the most important phase of growth, the phase where consistency matters more than intensity. When you stop too early, you interrupt the process before it has the chance to reward you. But when you keep going, even when the results aren't obvious, you unlock the true power of compounding. Think about it in the same way compound interest works in finance. At first, the growth is slow and unimpressive. Your money barely moves. But as time passes, those tiny amounts start building on themselves. A little growth becomes a bit more growth, and then even more. And suddenly the progress that once seemed negligible becomes unstoppable. The same law applies to your habits, your skills, your decisions, and your mindset. Every small improvement becomes a building block for the next improvement. That's why consistency is far more valuable than intensity. Intensity fades. Consistency grows. When you focus on small improvements, you eliminate the pressure to be perfect. You remove the fear of failure. You stop waiting for the perfect conditions. You stop thinking you need to overhaul your entire life overnight. Small improvements give you momentum. They give you confidence. They allow you to build discipline without burning out. You begin to see yourself as someone who takes action, someone who shows up, someone who moves forward even when progress feels slow. That shift in identity is far more important than any single dramatic achievement. Most extraordinary outcomes are built through ordinary actions, repeated consistently over time. A musician practicing scales daily, an investor reviewing data every morning, an athlete refining form rep after rep, a writer committing to one page a day, a thinker exploring one new idea consistently. These small, unglamorous actions compound into mastery. They don't happen in one burst of brilliance. They happen through the quiet choice to improve just a little every day. And here's the part most people overlook. Small improvements change how you think. They sharpen your awareness. They strengthen your discipline. They improve your emotional resilience. Every time you choose consistency over perfection, you reinforce the belief that you are capable of steady growth. That belief becomes a mental anchor that keeps you grounded when challenges arise. You start trusting the process instead of chasing shortcuts. When you commit to small improvements, life becomes less overwhelming. Big goals no longer intimidate you because you understand you don't need to accomplish them in one giant step. You understand that tiny momentum carried daily is more reliable than explosive effort that comes and goes. You begin to appreciate the beauty of slow, steady progress. You see how much more sustainable it is, how much more peaceful it feels, how much more effective it becomes over time. In the end, small, consistent improvements don't just change what you achieve. They change who you become. They transform your habits, your confidence, your clarity, and your capacity for long-term success. You stop living in cycles of burnout and start building a life anchored in sustainable growth. And when you look back after months or years, you realize that the little steps you once thought were insignificant were actually the steps that changed everything. Curiosity and persistence are two qualities people underestimate until they're standing in front of a problem that refuses to move. Most of the breakthroughs that shape a person's life don't come from moments of instant clarity or sudden inspiration. They come from staying with the questions long enough for answers to finally reveal themselves. Curiosity keeps you exploring, and persistence keeps you returning, even when the path feels unclear. Together, They form a powerful engine that drives growth, learning, and excellence in ways most people never truly experience. When you're genuinely curious, the world opens up in a way that people driven only by outcomes never get to see. Curiosity isn't passive, it's active. It's a hunger to understand, to explore, to dive deeper. It's what makes you take a second look at something others ignore. It's what makes you question why things work the way they do, instead of accepting them at face value. Curiosity is the spark that ignites innovation. Whether you're building a business, learning a new skill, or simply trying to understand your own habits, when you approach life with curiosity, you stop fearing the unknown because you are more interested in discovering what's inside it than running away from it. Persistence, on the other hand, is what turns curiosity into results. It's easy to be curious in the beginning when everything feels new and exciting. But as soon as you hit resistance, most people quit. They mistake difficulty for failure and frustration for a sign they're not capable. But persistence is about staying long enough to let the truth unfold. It's about showing up again and again, even when the previous attempts didn't go your way. Some of the most important insights you ever gain come right after the moment when you almost give up. But you only reach those breakthroughs if you stay committed long enough to get there. There's a reason persistence is rare. It's uncomfortable. It forces you to confront your limitations, to rewrite your assumptions, to tolerate uncertainty. But that discomfort is where real growth happens. When you persist through challenges, you develop resilience. You learn how to handle pressure. You discover your own strength. You build a mental toughness that becomes one of your greatest lifelong assets. And the funny thing is, the more you persist, the less intimidating challenges become. What once felt overwhelming starts to feel manageable. What once frustrated you starts to intrigue you. You begin to recognize difficulty as a sign you're expanding rather than shrinking. Curiosity and persistence together are what allow you to see patterns others overlook. They allow you to ask better questions, and better questions lead to better decisions. Sometimes you'll spend days or weeks chasing a problem, turning it over in your mind, exploring different angles, and then suddenly something clicks. The solution appears. The idea makes sense. The mess becomes clear. That moment isn't luck. It's the reward for staying curious long enough and persistent enough for clarity to emerge. Most people think intelligence is what separates high achievers from everyone else, but in reality, it's the willingness to keep going. It's the patience to investigate things deeply. It's the refusal to settle for the simplest explanation. Curiosity makes you a student of life. Persistence turns you into a master of the process. When you combine the two, you become unstoppable because you're no longer limited by how fast answers come. You're driven by the process of seeking them. There will always be days when nothing seems to work, when the data won't cooperate, when your ideas fall flat, when problems feel too complex to unravel. That's where most people lose momentum. But if you stay curious through the frustration and persistent through the confusion, something incredible happens. You develop internal confidence. You start trusting your ability to navigate tough situations. You learn that clarity isn't something you wait for, it's something you earn. You learn that progress isn't always visible, but it's happening behind the scenes, building toward the moment when everything aligns. Curiosity keeps your mind open. Persistence keeps your feet moving. And together, they shape a mindset that makes daily excellence possible. They help you grow in ways that aren't obvious at first, but become undeniable over time. You begin approaching challenges not with fear, but with interest. You handle obstacles not with panic, but with patience. You stop chasing easy answers and start valuing the journey of finding the right ones. And when you live this way, you discover that progress isn't just something you create, it becomes something you become. Most people think of discipline as this harsh, rigid force that locks you into strict routines and punishes you for slipping. They imagine discipline as waking up at the same time every day, following a strict plan, and forcing yourself to push through tasks you don't enjoy. But real discipline isn't about living inside a tight box or denying yourself every ounce of comfort. Real discipline is clarity. It's understanding what truly matters and directing your energy toward it with intention. When you're clear about what you want, what you value, and what moves you forward, discipline becomes less about pressure and more about alignment. Clarity is what separates scattered effort from focused effort. You can work hard every day and still feel like you're getting nowhere if your actions aren't connected to a clear sense of purpose. When you start your day without clarity, distractions feel louder, temptations feel stronger, and you end up reacting to whatever comes your way instead of directing your attention where it needs to go. But when you know exactly what deserves your time, your focus naturally sharpens. You stop giving energy to things that don't matter. You stop chasing every idea or impulse. You stop letting noise dictate your pace. When you operate with clarity, decisions become easier because they're guided by priorities instead of moods. You don't waste time debating whether you should do something. You already know what aligns with your goals. You already know what contributes to your growth. And when you understand that, discipline becomes less about force and more about intention. You're not trying to control everything, you're choosing the right things. You're choosing actions that serve your future rather than your momentary comfort. The reason so many people struggle with discipline is because they never take the time to get clear. They want better habits, better routines, better results, but they skip the step of understanding why those changes matter in the first place. Without clarity, discipline feels heavy. It feels restrictive. It feels like work. But with clarity, discipline feels like a natural extension of your purpose. When you're clear about what you're building, the daily actions, no matter how small, feel meaningful instead of burdensome. Clarity also protects you from burnout. When you're just pushing yourself without a sense of direction, exhaustion sets in quickly. But when your effort is tied to something you care about, you can handle challenges with more resilience. You understand that the discomfort has purpose. You understand that the effort is part of a bigger trajectory. Clarity doesn't eliminate obstacles, but it gives you the mental strength to move through them without losing momentum. Real discipline isn't about overwhelming yourself with tasks. It's about narrowing your focus to the things that produce real progress. It's removing unnecessary obligations, not adding more. It's saying no to distractions, even when they're appealing. It's reorganizing your environment so it supports your goals instead of fighting against them. Clarity simplifies discipline because it removes the constant internal debate. You no longer ask, should I do this? You already know. And the beautiful thing about clarity is that it grows stronger the more you practice it. The more intentional you are with your choices, the sharper your priorities become. You start recognizing which habits help you and which ones drain you. You start noticing what environments make you productive and which ones sabotage your progress. You become more aware of how your time gets spent and how it should be spent. That awareness naturally strengthens your discipline because it keeps you aligned with what matters. Clarity also deepens your confidence. When you're intentional, you trust your decisions more. You don't feel guilty for saying no. You don't second-guess the path you're on. You understand the direction you're moving in, so self-doubt loses its grip. Discipline becomes less of a bell and more of a rhythm, something that supports you instead of something you fight against. When you live with clarity, you begin to see that discipline isn't about being perfect. It's about being purposeful. It's about choosing the actions that align with your goals, even when they're not the easiest or most comfortable options. It's about recognizing that every choice shapes your future. And when you understand that, discipline becomes less of a struggle and more of a natural byproduct of living with intention. Clarity makes discipline lighter, stronger, and far more sustainable, turning it into a tool that guides you toward excellence, one deliberate decision at a time. So many people judge their days by how much they get done, how many tasks checked off, how busy they felt, or how productive they appeared to others. But measuring your day by busyness is one of the biggest traps you can fall into. Busyness creates the illusion of progress, while often delivering very little that truly moves you forward. When you live this way, you end up exhausted, overwhelmed, and unsure why all your hard work isn't translating into meaningful results. That's why measuring your days by intention instead of activity is such a powerful shift. It changes the way you work, the way you think, and ultimately the way you build your life. When you measure your days by intention, you focus on what actually matters rather than what simply fills time. You stop chasing the feeling of being productive and start pursuing actions that create real progress. One well-chosen task done with purpose can move you further than 10 random tasks done in a rush. Intention sharpens your direction. It gives your day structure without drowning you in unnecessary obligation. Instead of asking yourself how much you did, you start asking whether what you did aligned with your goals, your values, and the person you want to become. The truth is that most of the stress people feel doesn't come from having too much to do. It comes from not being clear about what truly deserves their time. When you begin your day without intention, everything feels urgent. Everything feels important. Every interruption pulls you off course. You drift from one thing to another, hoping that sheer activity will eventually lead somewhere meaningful. But intention turns chaos into clarity. It turns noise into focus. It turns motion into progress. When you operate intentionally, your day feels calmer, even when you're busy, because you know why you're doing what you're doing. You're not chasing every task. You're not reacting to every demand. You're choosing your actions deliberately. And when you choose deliberately, you begin to notice how much time you used to waste on things that didn't matter. You start recognizing which habits drain you without adding value. You realize how often you were busy simply because you were unfocused. Measuring your day by intention also helps you bring more presence into your life. When you choose your activities consciously, you're more engaged with them. You're not rushing through everything just to get to the next thing. You slow down enough to actually experience your day instead of racing through it on autopilot. This kind of presence makes your work stronger, your relationships deeper, and your inner life more grounded. You begin to feel connected to what you're doing rather than overwhelmed by it. Another powerful effect of living with intention is that it reduces guilt. When you measure your day by busyness, you always feel like you're not doing enough. There's always something else you could be tackling, something unfinished, something waiting. But when you focus on intention, you give yourself permission to prioritize. You give yourself permission to choose what matters over what merely demands attention. And once you've committed to completing the meaningful tasks, you don't waste mental energy worrying about the rest. Intention brings relief because it reminds you that you don't need to do everything, you just need to do the right things. Intention also creates consistency. It becomes easier to show up every day when you know why you're showing up. You're not relying on motivation, which comes and goes. You're relying on clarity, which you build through reflection, planning, and awareness. And because your actions are tied to a bigger purpose, the days you don't feel inspired still end up being productive in a meaningful way. Intention keeps you moving even when the emotional highs fade. The beauty of living this way is that results start to grow naturally. When your actions are intentional, they serve your long-term goals. They build skills, strengthen habits, deepen understanding, and create momentum. Even on quieter days, you're building something. Over time, those intentional choices compound. They shape your identity, they shift your mindset, they make your path clearer and your progress more consistent. When you measure your days by intention instead of busyness, you stop living reactively and start living consciously. You stop letting the world pull you in every direction and start choosing your direction yourself. And that choice made day after day changes everything. Consistency is one of those qualities that sounds simple in theory, but becomes incredibly powerful in practice. Everyone loves the idea of sudden breakthroughs and dramatic leaps forward, but the real transformation in life happens when you commit to showing up again and again. Even when the progress is slow, even when the excitement fades, even when nobody is watching. Consistency doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't require brilliance. It simply asks you to keep moving, keep improving, and keep choosing the path that aligns with your goals. Over time, consistency outperforms intensity because intensity burns bright and dies fast, while consistency builds slow and lasts long. Think about how many people start strong. They get motivated, set huge goals, and go all in for a few days or weeks. They push hard, trying to change everything at once. But when the initial rush wears off or life gets overwhelming, they slip, they stop, and they lose momentum. That's the problem with relying on intensity. It's like running a sprint when what you really need is the mindset of a marathon. Consistency, on the other hand, doesn't rely on motivation. It's built on habits, on systems, on small actions repeated until they become second nature. When you embrace consistency, you stop depending on emotional highs to keep going. Consistency is powerful because it compounds. Just like small amounts of money grow exponentially when invested wisely, small daily actions accumulate into massive results when repeated over time. One page written every day becomes a book. One workout a day becomes strength. 15 minutes of learning a day becomes expertise. Reviewing data for an hour each morning becomes mastery. None of these results look impressive in the moment, but they become almost unstoppable when you repeat them day after day. That compounding effect is what separates people who grow steadily from those who stay stuck. in cycles of starting and stopping. Another reason consistency beats intensity is because it's sustainable. Intensity often leads to burnout, exhaustion, or frustration because it demands too much too quickly. You might push yourself to the limit for a short period, but no one can maintain peak effort continuously. Life gets busy, stress happens, energy fluctuates. Consistency doesn't fight these realities, it works with them. It gives you a way to keep moving forward even on your toughest days. You don't need to be at your best to be consistent. You just need to be present. That's what makes it realistic and achievable across months and years rather than days. Consistency also strengthens your identity. Every time you show up for something, you reinforce the belief that you are the kind of person who follows through. You become someone who keeps promises to yourself. That kind of identity shift is powerful because once you see yourself as someone consistent, your actions naturally align with that belief. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop overthinking. You simply follow the path you've committed to. And because you're consistent, you build confidence, you trust yourself more, you rely less on external validation and more on your own steady progress. There's another subtle but important thing consistency does. It stabilizes your emotions. When your progress depends on intensity, your feelings dictate your actions. You work when you feel motivated and stop when you don't. But when you build consistency, your actions become independent of your moods. You show up because it's what you do, not because you feel like it. This emotional stability allows you to survive the ups and downs of life without losing your momentum. You become more resilient, more steady, and more grounded. Consistency also teaches patience. It reminds you that meaningful results take time. When you commit to the long game, you stop expecting instant gratification. You stop comparing your progress to others. You stop rushing. Instead, you learn to trust the process, to respect the journey, and to appreciate the gradual improvements that build into something extraordinary. This kind of patience reduces frustration because you understand that every small step has value, even when the finish line isn't visible yet. What many people don't realize is that consistency isn't about doing the same thing perfectly every day. It's about maintaining direction. It's about returning to your path, no matter how many times you step off it. It's about repeating the right habits often enough that they become part of your life story. And once they're part of your life story, results follow naturally. You don't have to force them. You don't have to chase them. You just keep going, and they grow. In the end, consistency is the quiet force behind every great achievement. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. But it builds momentum that becomes impossible to ignore. And when you embrace it, you realize you don't need explosive effort to change your life. You just need steady effort, repeated with intention, until it becomes part of who you are. When you start investing, especially with small amounts, one of the biggest challenges you face isn't the market or timing or even finding the right stocks. It's your own emotions. Most people don't realize that the line separating successful investors from struggling ones is usually emotional control. It's the ability to not panic when the market dips, not get greedy when some spikes, and not lose discipline the moment things get uncomfortable. Jim Simons understood this better than anyone, even though he built the most mathematically advanced investing system ever created. He often said the hardest part wasn't the algorithms. It was staying consistent and not letting feelings interfere with decisions. Emotional control is a skill, not a personality trait. Anyone can develop it if they learn to observe their reactions before they act. Think about what usually happens to a new investor. You buy a stock, it goes up a little, and suddenly you feel smart. Your confidence jumps, your ego kicks in, and you start believing you've figured something out that others haven't. Then the stock dips a bit, and you feel anxious. You start checking your phone constantly, reading news, scrolling through comments, and your mind runs in circles. If it drops more, you panic. You sell it out of fear, only to watch it bounce back later. The profit you could have made is gone because you were reacting to stress instead of sticking to a plan. This emotional roller coaster is normal, but if you don't take control of it, it becomes expensive. Jim Simons solved this by removing emotion from the decision process. He relied on data, patterns, and probabilities, not feelings. Of course, you and I don't have access to a billion-dollar algorithm, but we can apply the same principle by creating simple rules and sticking to them. When you invest small amounts, emotional discipline matters even more because every irrational decision magnifies the impact. If your investment capital is limited, You can't afford to lose money simply because you felt scared for a moment. You need a system, even if it's basic. You need rules that guide your decisions so your emotions don't. One helpful method is to decide in advance what you'll do in different situations. For example, you can set a rule that you won't sell anything based on short-term noise. You might choose a rule that says you'll invest a fixed amount every month, no matter how the market behaves. Or you might set predefined points where you take profit instead of relying on impulse. These simple decisions reduce emotional pressure because you already know what your next move is, even before things get chaotic. It removes the uncertainty that fuels anxiety. Another major emotional trap is comparison. You see someone online making huge returns, and suddenly your own progress feels too slow. So you take bigger risks, chase hype, or buy into something you barely understand. This is how most small investors lose money. They follow emotion-driven trends instead of reliable strategies. Jim Simons didn't chase what was popular. He focused on what consistently worked, even if it wasn't glamorous. When you stop comparing your journey to others, you begin making smarter decisions based on your own goals rather than someone else's results. Patience is another form of emotional control. Most people underestimate how powerful patience is in investing because they want results fast. They want to double their money, they want excitement, and they want the feeling of winning right now. But real wealth grows slowly and quietly through consistent, disciplined choices. When you're patient, your emotions become less reactive. You stop panicking at small drops because you know long-term growth matters more. You stop jumping at quick spikes because you're thinking beyond the next hour. Patience turns volatility from something scary into something manageable. Finally, emotional control requires self-awareness. Notice how you feel when your investments move. Notice the thoughts that come up when you see red or green numbers. You don't have to eliminate those feelings. You just need to understand them so they don't dictate your behavior. The moment you become aware of your emotions, you take back control from impulsive reactions. You start investing like a strategist instead of a gambler. If you can master emotional discipline, even your smallest investments become more powerful because they're backed by clarity, intention, and consistency rather than fear or excitement. That's how you grow money steadily instead of losing it through emotional decisions. And that's how you build real confidence as an investor in any market. One of the biggest mistakes small investors make is assuming they need to win big instantly. They jump into investments hoping for a sudden explosion, as if doubling their money overnight is the only path to success. But Jim Simons teaches the opposite. He shows that the real advantage small investors have isn't speed or size, it's consistency. Even small amounts can grow into something meaningful when you commit to regular investing without constantly second-guessing yourself. This is where structured discipline becomes more powerful than capital. You don't need a lot to start. You need the habit of showing up financially month after month, regardless of what the market is doing. When you look at people who actually become wealthy through investing, most of them didn't start with huge amounts. They started with whatever they had and kept adding to it consistently. It wasn't the size of the contributions that changed their lives. It was the rhythm. The market rewards rhythm because it smooths out emotional mistakes. If you invest only when you feel confident, you're already behind. The market doesn't move based on your mood. It moves with or without you. When you invest on a schedule, whether weekly or monthly, you protect yourself from emotional timing errors. This is exactly what Jim Simons believed in, following a system, even when your feelings tell you to break it. A lot of people underestimate the power of small amounts because they calculate only the dollar value, not the behavior behind it. A habit is far more valuable than a lump sum. A habit grows. A habit compounds. A habit becomes automatic. And once investing becomes automatic, everything changes. You stop hesitating. You stop trying to predict the perfect moment. You stop being pulled by panic or hype. You become someone who builds wealth in the background, quietly and steadily. This is how true financial foundations are formed, not through one big winning trade, but through 1,000 consistent steps. Another advantage of consistent small investing is that it trains your mind to think long-term. When you're contributing regularly, your mindset naturally shifts from short bursts of excitement to slow, steady progress. You start viewing a market dip not as a threat, but as an opportunity to buy at a discount. You begin to understand that the market's ups and downs are normal, even necessary. You become less reactive and more strategic. This is exactly how Jim Simons approached investing. He didn't panic because he was focused on the long arc, not the daily chaos. Small investors who adopt this mindset transform the way they interact with money. A major benefit of this approach is that it reduces pressure. When you rely on one big trade or one big contribution, everything feels stressful. You feel like you must get it right. But when you invest small amounts consistently, there's no single moment that has the power to make or break your progress. Your results come from your pattern, not a single decision. This creates a sense of calm that most investors never experience. You no longer worry about catching the perfect entry. You no longer freeze because you're afraid of making a mistake. You just follow the process you've chosen, knowing that over time, the consistency is what compounds. What many people don't realize is that consistency also creates accountability. When you're investing regularly, you stay connected to your financial goals. You stay aware of your spending. You become more thoughtful about where your money goes. Your financial life becomes intentional instead of accidental. This heightened awareness strengthens every part of your financial mindset. You start noticing opportunities you would have ignored. You start valuing disciplined decisions. You start understanding how small behaviors shape big outcomes. Consistency also builds confidence. After a few months of investing regularly, you see progress, even if it's small. That progress becomes motivating. You feel proud of sticking to a plan. You feel capable. You feel empowered. That emotional shift is priceless because confidence fuels momentum. When you believe you can build wealth, you start acting like someone who builds wealth. This psychological evolution is often more valuable than the financial gains themselves. Following Jim Simons' philosophy, the real secret isn't having a lot of money. It's having a strategy you can repeat consistently. The market rewards discipline far more than it rewards excitement. Even the smallest investor can outperform bigger players if they stay consistent longer. Consistency multiplies your efforts, protects you from emotional errors, and transforms investing from something intimidating into something achievable. It turns every small amount into a meaningful step toward financial growth because you're no longer hoping for luck. You're building a process that works regardless of the market's mood. When most people think about achieving success, they focus on talent, intelligence, or even luck. While those factors play a role, what truly separates successful investors and high achievers from the rest is the willingness to refine their methods and improve their thinking continuously. It's not enough to work hard. You need to work smart, and smart work comes from constantly examining how you approach problems, making adjustments, and learning from experience. Jim Simons understood this deeply. His edge wasn't just in his mathematical genius, it was in his relentless pursuit of better systems, better strategies, and better ways of interpreting data. That mindset can be applied to anyone's life, not just investing. One of the most powerful habits you can develop is to regularly review what you're doing and ask yourself, is there a better way? Most people avoid this question because it's uncomfortable. It forces you to admit mistakes, face inefficiencies, and confront the gaps in your knowledge. But those moments of discomfort are where real growth happens. Improvement doesn't come from assuming you're already right. It comes from challenging your assumption, analyzing your results, and finding the adjustments that move you closer to excellence. Over time, this habit of reflection and refinement becomes the engine for progress. Improving your methods isn't about making radical changes every day. It's about small tweaks, subtle adjustments that optimize your process without derailing it. Jim Simons didn't reinvent the wheel constantly. He refined it. He tested, measured, and optimized, seeking patterns that gave him a predictive edge. Similarly, in your life, these small improvements can compound into major advantages, changing how you approach a problem, adjusting how you allocate your time, learning a more effective way to communicate, or adopting a slightly more efficient routine may seem minor in isolation, but over months and years, these incremental changes accumulate into remarkable results. Another critical aspect of improving your thinking is embracing curiosity and questioning your assumptions. Many people accept the world as it appears and make decisions based on what seems obvious. But real growth requires digging deeper, asking why, and being willing to see things from different perspectives. When you combine that curiosity with persistence, you start recognizing patterns others miss. You start understanding the subtle dynamics that drive outcomes. Jim Simons didn't simply react to data. He sought to understand it at a fundamental level, questioning his own biases and assumptions, and constantly testing to see what worked best. Learning from failure is a crucial part of refining methods. Most people treat mistakes as setbacks, something to be avoided at all costs. But mistakes are feedback, and feedback is a tool. Each time a method fails or a strategy doesn't produce the desired outcome, you have the opportunity to analyze it, extract lessons, adapt. Over time, this iterative process of testing, failing, and improving becomes second nature. You stop fearing errors and start valuing them as necessary steps in the path to mastery. That's the mindset Jim Simons cultivated. Every challenge, every loss, and every anomaly became data to improve the system. Improving your thinking also requires removing noise and focusing on clarity. It's easy to get distracted by trends, opinions, or surface-level information. But those who refine their methods focus on the core variables that truly matter. They strip away the irrelevant and concentrate on what drives results. In life, this means identifying your priorities and aligning your daily actions with them. It means thinking critically, questioning assumptions, and committing to decisions based on evidence and reason rather than impulse or emotion. Consistency in this process is just as important as the improvements themselves. A small refinement applied once or twice doesn't create impact. Consistent refinement over time does. Every time you review your methods, every time you adjust, every time you learn, you build a cumulative advantage. That's how small thinkers get left behind, while those who constantly improve continue to grow, adapt, and outperform. Your edge comes from the compounding effect of better thinking and smarter processes. Ultimately, the lesson is clear. Working harder than everyone else isn't enough. Thinking harder, smarter, and more systematically, combined with the discipline to continuously refine methods, is what produces results. Improvement is a lifelong habit, not a destination. By examining your processes, learning from experience, questioning assumptions, and optimizing your approach, you create a self-reinforcing system of growth. Over time, these incremental improvements don't just make you more effective, they transform the way you see problems, make decisions, and achieve your goals, giving you the edge needed to succeed in any field. Excellence is something most people think of as a destination, a final achievement, or a title to earn. But the truth is, excellence is rarely a single moment or a flashy milestone. Excellence is a byproduct of the daily choices you make, the habit you cultivate, and the mindset you adopt consistently over time. It doesn't come from trying to be perfect or from pushing yourself to extremes occasionally. It comes from the commitment to get a little better each day, to show up fully, and to honor the small actions that over months and years accumulate into remarkable results. When you understand this, you start to see that excellence isn't something you chase, it's something you become through deliberate practice. The power of incremental improvement is often underestimated. Most people want rapid results, something dramatic to validate their effort. They expect breakthroughs to happen overnight. So when progress feels slow or subtle, they lose motivation. But real excellence is built on tiny steps, repeated consistently. Each day, you refine a skill, make a wiser decision, or strengthen a habit. You're stacking the foundation for your future self. These small wins may seem invisible in the moment, but they compound quietly, steadily building momentum that eventually becomes unstoppable. The key is persistence, the willingness to continue, even when results aren't immediately obvious. When you focus on daily improvement, you also shift the way you measure success. Instead of asking whether you've reached a goal, you ask whether today you acted with intention. Did you do something that moved you forward even slightly? Did you honor your standards? Did you challenge yourself in a meaningful way? Excellence isn't about perfection. It's about progress. It's about creating a pattern of behavior that over time produces extraordinary outcomes. The person who consistently seeks to improve, refine, and elevate their approach every day naturally develops an edge that outpaces those who rely on occasional bursts of effort. Consistency in small actions doesn't just produce results, it builds identity. Every time you show up intentionally, you reinforce the idea that you are someone who honors your commitments, someone who values quality, someone who refuses to settle. That identity becomes self-reinforcing. Your actions start to reflect the person you're becoming rather than the fleeting moods you experience. Excellence becomes less about performing under pressure and more about living in alignment with your principles. It becomes your standard, not a goal. Another important aspect of daily excellence is the awareness it cultivates. When you focus on improving incrementally, you become more attentive to your choices, habits, and environment. You start noticing inefficiencies, distractions, and patterns that hold you back. You learn to remove what doesn't serve your purpose and amplify what does. You develop the discipline to protect your time, attention, and energy because you understand that these are the resources that fuel sustained growth. Over time, this awareness becomes intuitive, guiding your decisions without constant deliberation. Daily excellence also teaches resilience. When you commit to showing up, even on days when you don't feel like it, you learn to navigate discomfort without losing momentum. You learn that discipline is not punishment but empowerment. You discover that setbacks are not failures but feedback, opportunities to refine your approach and strengthen your skills. This mindset transforms obstacles into stepping stones and challenges into opportunities for growth. Excellence, in this sense, is inseparable from persistence and patience. Finally, excellence compounds in ways that are both visible and invisible. The external results, the achievements, recognition, or wealth are the obvious signs, but the internal transformation, the habits, confidence, clarity, and wisdom are the invisible rewards that matter even more. When you commit to improving a little each day, you're not just chasing outcomes, you're redeveloping the person capable of sustaining and expanding those outcomes over time. You stop relying on luck or extraordinary moments because excellence becomes a natural consequence of the way you live. Daily practice, small wins, deliberate effort, they all converge to make excellence inevitable, turning it from a distant aspiration into a living reality that shapes every aspect of your life.